Welcome to Around the Girdle Earth, the podcast where Dartmouth stories come to life. I'm your host, Yovany Jerez D’03, and each episode we sit down with members of the Dartmouth alumni community to explore the moments, the mentors, and the memories that shaped them, from the green to the great unknown. Whether you graduated last year or you've been a Dartmouth alum for many decades, we hope that these conversations offer a window into the various journeys we have taken and the common thread that connect us all as Dartmouth alumni. So grab your favorite drink, take a walk, and let's dive right in. Today, I have the pleasure of having a dialogue with Yan Somoza. Yan, why don't you jump right in? You graduated in 2004.
That's right.
Can you give us a glimpse, a little bit of your background before Dartmouth?
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me, Yovany. It's a real pleasure and honor that we've reconnected. Well, before I went to Dartmouth, I grew up in Los Angeles, which is a diverse city in and of itself already. But where I was specifically reared was the area of Silver Lake, which I think at this point is pretty famous, but at that point was not. Other than maybe the people who lived at the top of the hills, it was a pretty much middle class, working class community, quite diverse. There were, working class Latinos like my family. There were actually a strong presence of gay men. And so it was just a melting pot of what you think a small artsy enclave of LA might be. In terms of education, I went to Loyola High School, which is a Jesuit college prep. So some of it was very traditional, but some of it was also more Socratic, and there was an openness to new ideas and challenging people. Also, because it was the Jesuits, there was a slant towards social justice and ethical and spiritual possibility. The leadership would always joke around, we're not preparing your student to go to Harvard, we're preparing them to get into heaven. So there was always an eye towards, service and figuring out how to best help your fellow man and leveraging one's education to do that. So I think that stuck with me. That was a part of me even before Dartmouth, but it was just cemented at Dartmouth.
So what's your family structure during this time?
During this time, it was a small family, which was actually my mom. And at this point, my father had moved back to El Salvador, actually, because he's a recording artist. And there was a time where he was big in the United States, not like huge, but pretty well known in the LA area. And after some time off, that dried up here. So he went back to El Salvador. But we had a very wide network of family on both sides that lived in the greater LA area. My tío lived on the same street as us. My mom's older brother, my other tío, lived like 2 blocks away. So we were always close to each other, and it was always an open door policy. If someone was hungry, if someone just wanted to pay a visit, take a nap, you could go to any of our houses, which was kind of cool. I think the boundaries have changed since then with our generation, but at that time it was awesome.
Yeah, that's funky to hear. How did you learn about Dartmouth? I mean, like, you're in the West Coast. I mean, I understand if you tell me Stanford, but
right.
Learn about Dartmouth.
Of course, the big ones in LA, UCLA, USC, or all the UCs. I knew about the Ivy League just because in the common mythology, that's it. That's the top of the pecking order. But about Dartmouth specifically, I didn't know really hardly anything, but I did well on the PSAT and became a National Hispanic Merit Scholar. And I started getting letters and brochures from all the schools, and Dartmouth was one of them, and that's when I became interested.
And so, did you visit before applying? What was your first impression arriving to Dartmouth?
It's a funny thing. I did have an interview, which was an in-person interview with alumni, and they were really helpful in helping me conceptualize what it would be like. And I was originally supposed to go to an on-campus visit, but that weekend coincided with my prom. And I had pretty much already made my decision that I was going to Dartmouth. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to jump in and I'm going to show up the first day and sink or swim. And luckily I got there. And of course, as we all know, it's a beautiful campus, lush, beautiful green surroundings. So it was a nice relief. But like the interviewers told me, what's your idea of Dartmouth? I said, a bunch of little white buildings in the middle of the woods. They're like, yeah, basically that at its most essential, that's it.
Yeah. I do say like you. I think I was mesmerized that first impression, my first campus visit. Right, like very. It just felt like such a curated place. Right,
Yeah,
such a. It felt so safe. It felt like
absolutely.
I could walk in there, be myself. It just also felt like a very, even though it was curated, even though it had its own culture, I felt like I fit in. Like
Yeah,
my unique, diverse background was welcome and like necessary in order
right.
for this thing to work. Um, so I empathize with your comments. So let's do a little bit of rapid fire questions on
Sounds
your
good.
Dartmouth experience. So what was first of all, what was your major?
I had a double major, which was psychological and brain sciences, very hard science, kind of neuroscience based. And English was my other major with a minor in Spanish literature.
Did you do any hobbies, sports, intramural?
I did some acting with some of our Latino boys, and you remember this. We would go to salsa nights at other Ivy League schools. I played rugby for a couple years, and I was consistently weight training, so I was really in great shape. And yeah, that's some of the stuff I did.
Gosh, I feel like that's a story in itself. A Latino
Yeah,
playing rugby.
right. But
Yeah.
you'd be surprised. There were a couple of us, and some of the best teams are Latin American. Argentina has a great rugby team and a great rugby tradition, actually.
Wow. What was your favorite dorm or your favorite campus space?
My favorite campus space was, I forget what it's called. I'm sure it has a specific name, but the Baker Library, that old room that faces the green, that was my absolute favorite space.
Sanborn?
Sanborn, yeah, I think so. But it overlooks the green and it had those wingback chairs. And I probably napped there more than I studied, but it was just such a vibe. It was like, wow, this is such a unique experience.
Okay, so now we know about your favorite study spot or nap spot.
Yeah.
Did you pull many all-nighters? Any memories around that?
Um, Not really, to be honest. I did not put in many academic all-nighters, social all-nighters for sure, but not academic, except one time I remember freshman year, I had a deadline for an English paper and we got a blitz, our instant email system that the women's rugby team had won their championship. And even though it was 2 or 3 a.m., we had to show up to celebrate for them. And so it would have turned into an all-nighter academically, but it was much more fun than that.
So, so that means you were way more disciplined with your academic duties than I was because I pulled like at least 10 all-nighters.
Yeah, I think I was once I got into the groove of things.
So what traditions do you still carry from Dartmouth into today's life?
The overarching mantra of work hard, play hard, like you were saying, it's such a unique spot with all these people who are very intelligent and in leadership roles. And so I like to take a leadership role in my professional context, but I also know that I have to have a good work-life balance and enjoy my life with as much gusto as that.
Yeah. And do you remember your favorite professor or your favorite class?
Probably a couple of favorite classes. One was Dr. Peter C. He's actually now the chair of the psych department. His class was perception, all about how our brain translates our sensory experience. Social cognitive neuroscience was another cool one. That's the structure of the brain and how it relates to our understanding of ourselves as a social being, which is cool. And then my final Spanish literature class, because we were studying Spanish literature of the turn of the last century, and we got to do a play at the end, which was super cool, from the special collections from the Baker Library.
Yeah, I remember very keenly browsing a second edition of Don Quixote de la Mancha
Wow.
at the special collection library, and I always just remember that being such a memorable
Yeah.
experience. You know.
Yeah. Same for me. There was a time where Lady Windermere's Fan by Oscar Wilde was not available. Guess what? They had the first edition in the special library, so I read that.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I know you could pull from many Dartmouth experiences. Is there anyone in particular that makes you smile and kind of comes to the forefront?
Yeah, the one that I think about that makes me smile for sure is you and I and a few other people were driving back from Brown. And remember that? And I don't know if
Yeah.
you timed it that way, but I saw the most amazing meteor shower. I've never seen anything like it since.
Oh,
And it was
that's
just,
right.
remember, it was
That's
just like
right.
sort of the cherry on the top of our.
It was you, Christine Miller. Um, yeah, it was a group of us.
Yeah,
We went to Brown.
we went to Brown for a salsa night.
That's right.
And then the drive home, it's like beautiful, woody. So all these stars were just shooting amazing.
That is a. I'm so glad you brought that up. That
We
was a
forgot about it.
fantastic memory. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you were
Because
busy driving, so that's probably
well, I
why.
was, but even then, it was like right in front of us.
Right.
It was just like
Every
20,
second.
40 meters, just like boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom, boom. It was gorgeous. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
absolutely gorgeous. So that's a good memory. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm wondering if you, once you graduated Dartmouth, now do your post life, how would you summarize your professional trajectory?
So basically, after Dartmouth, I chose a doctoral program that was very clinically based because I wanted to be a psychologist and I wanted to work in the field, not necessarily just do research. And so after that, I've had some training pre-doctorally at UCLA, postdoctorally at USC, and it's been around working with diverse families and more recently with an emphasis on neuropsychology and neurodiversity, such as autism spectrum disorder.
So you went to Dartmouth, you graduated now. How are you now orienting yourself from a professional perspective? How did you even pick your track? Help us summarize a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So one thing that struck me was in one of my psych courses, a professor talked about how psychiatry was a lot of medication management. And originally I thought, okay, pre-med, MD, but he really changed my perspective that the psychologists are working in therapy, doing assessments, doing consulting, all that kind of stuff that's really rich. And so I found a program for my doctoral program that was very clinically focused. And after that, I did some work at UCLA, USC, and have focused my most recent career in working with diverse families around neurodiversity or children who are on the spectrum.
Wow. And what triggered that passion?
Well, I think it's the complexity of the brain. There's an old adage that says there's more neuronal connections, synapses in the brain than there are stars in the galaxy. So at that level of complexity, it's fascinating. So to understand the brain and how that becomes not entirely analogous, but so foundational to a human being's experience, that was where I think the passion started.
So I have a feeling that if you had to do a 20-minute TED talk, it will be around that topic.
Yes, probably. Yeah.
And what
Neurodiversity.
What would be some of those key bullet points that you would share on that TED Talk?
Well, the bullet points that people are diverse in so many ways, and some of it is the way we're wired in our brain, and that it's not better or less than, it's just that it's a different way of navigating and operating that's not typical. So another big point, it's kind of a cliche in our field, but it's good to share with lay people. Think about an autistic brain like an Xbox. You wouldn't say an Xbox was broken because you were putting a PlayStation game in there and it didn't work. It needs the right inputs for it to operate correctly.
Wow, I like that metaphor a lot.
Yeah.
I'm very curious as to um, your journey, your professional journey, right? I know you work for some big firms and big medical groups, and now you're entered the entrepreneurship side
That's
of your
right.
life. So
Yes.
maybe you could talk a little bit about that transition and that comparison. I think that would be awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. So about at this point, I would say properly, we've been open a year. I opened my own neuropsych testing clinic called Somos. We are. And it's been an eye-opening experience. I had a lot of different big agencies with whom I worked. That big can very readily translate into bureaucratic behemoths that aren't agile. And I would bring in these programs that would address patient care or would improve communication amongst providers. And just because the system is so siloed and entrenched, I wasn't getting much traction. So I said, you know what? If I had my own clinic, then all the workflows and all of the mission would be based on my conception. And so for a little over a year now, I've been doing that. And so far, there have been challenges, of course, but as many or certainly perhaps more rewards than the challenges.
I mean, entrepreneurship is not easy, and
No,
you're going from not only providing a service, but now it's like you're running a business. You got to think about
right.
rent, utilities. How do you gain
Yes,
clients? And
right.
yeah, so
We
it's
had we have an intern, and she actually asked me, "So, Dr. Somoza, how do you open up a clinic like this?" And I said, "You asked a mouthful, but there's 10 huge steps and probably like 100 little steps that you have to take. I couldn't just answer that in one sitting."
yeah. I always find it funky how folks argue. Oh yeah, I want to open my own business because I want to define my own schedule. And I'm like, yeah, your schedule is defined very easily. You're working 24/7.
Right, basically. Yep, you're working harder.
Yeah, but again, if it's your passion and that's your pathway to the impact and the legacy that you want to do,
Right.
right? And maybe that's the next question. Like, how are you envisioning your legacy?
Well, one of the things already we've achieved, which is in a large catchment of the Coachella Valley, which is the greater Palm Springs area, there is no one else who's really doing the kind of psychological evaluations we're doing, and especially not bicultural, bilingual, who is oriented to Latino culture. So that part we've achieved. For the future, I'm thinking about a nonprofit arm where we'll get supports for these families and for these children who are on the spectrum that they may not have access through because of limited finances, or that it's not something quote unquote medical, but it could help their development, and gathering resources for their benefit.
Very, very cool. And as you reflect on your entire journey, is there anything that you would do differently for the sake of optimizing, even like your 4 years at Dartmouth, right? If there was a high school student like, hey, how would I optimize my 4 years at Dartmouth, or a recent grad? How do I optimize my time post Dartmouth? What would you say?
Right. Well, I would definitely lean in on older students who can guide you a little bit more to sort of pick the right classes and figure out what your ideal major is, or what the classes that might be the most brilliant or inspiring professors, because that's not necessarily something I had access to as much. I definitely had you as a resource, but not a lot of older students giving me that guidance, but I would tap them if I were still at Dartmouth.
Yeah, like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like reach out to the
Exactly.
folks. You can either learn through experience or you can learn from the experiences of others. And one of
Right.
those two ways, it's a lot faster.
Absolutely. Yes.
I think my grandfather would emphasize that for me, and some things you just got to learn on your own, no doubt about it. But
Naturally.
if you could pick the stories and the experiences of others, and separate the meat from the bone, right, and take
Yes.
what's helpful to you, I think that's a fantastic way to speed your way through life. I get together with about 40, 50 guys once a month
Yeah.
to just kind of like do some libations and cigars, but the most important part is sharing each other's playbooks as
Yes.
husbands, as fathers,
Right.
in the corporate world, and that's what we're doing. We're basically the shortcuts of how we all figure out our
Right.
playbook, right, and how
What
that.
are the work and life hacks that other people have?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
absolutely. Anything else you want to share as we wrap up this podcast?
Just to people who don't know about the Dartmouth Spirit, to share with them how unique and inimitable and incomparable it all is, and the closest thing you could come to a cult without being creepy, and the closest thing you could probably come to a family without it being drama.
Without being dysfunctional.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's a beautiful metaphor. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Jan. I know we could
Sure.
speak for more, but this was very substantial and very insightful. To all of you that made some time to join us and learn more about Jan and his story, thank you for being part of this podcast. If today's conversation sparked a memory or gave you something to think about, please leave us a thoughtful reflection or introspection in the comment section. And do go out of your way to share this episode with a classmate, a fellow alum. It's basically one more way of keeping the spirit of Dartmouth alive in this new digital age.
Definitely.
So until next time, keep sharing your stories. Stay curious. Keep roaming this beautiful Girdle Earth. Thank you.
Thank you.